As far as your E&O carrier, I would urge you all to reach out to an E&O carrier whenever anything like this happens and ask for their advice, especially when a bank tries to approach you that wasn't a merger bank like we talked before, but a bank that bought acquisitions. And they come to you and they say, and we've seen some pretty forceful letters written to appraisers where they say, you either respond, and if you don't, we're going to turn you into the state, we're going to put you on our exclusionary list, and we're going to go after your E&O insurance. I mean, they're boldly coming right out and telling you what they're going to do if you don't play along with them. But then your E&O company, in most cases, is going to say, you can't talk to them. You've done a huge mistake the first thing you do. If you open up that confidentiality, you break that right there and then, you've made your first mistake as an appraiser.
Right, and the second part about that is if you, I really focus working on these all the time. We have a lot of clients with this. I can't tell you how many times where the appraiser got the response, they wrote off a quick response back, defending them, and then they come back and say, oh, sorry, not good enough, you're buying back the loan, and now they're like, they throw their hands up, and then they call their E&O, and the E&O company says, you should have never responded and call us. That's why you pay for E&O. They're there. Bob?
I was going to say, a lot of people, at least in New Jersey, are insured with Intercorp.
Mm-hmm.
I just received an email, I read it this morning, they have a hotline for this purpose, for you to call and get advice from a law firm.
Excellent.
Yeah.
It's free at that point.
Do any of you have your E&O insurance with a company called Landy?
A lot of people.
Okay, have you received a letter that they just sent out recently, the announcement? No, they sent out an announcement indicating, and this, I mean, I saw the announcement and I wanted to make sure that this is legitimate. I'll be contacting them. They just spoke at our summer seminars. But they did send out an announcement saying that effective immediately on all their policies, they will only insure up to $100,000 on claims made by FDIC, any other federal or state agency, regulatory agency.
Intercorp had something to that, but not they would, but Intercorp is a policy that does insure.
Right. So if you have Landy, that might be something you want to look into. That particular bulletin's been flying around all over in Chicago. Okay, this one's yours, Tommy.
All right, so how do you prepare to rebut a negative review? What do you need on here? Well, obviously you need a copy of the review report, like Tim said. You want to look at your original appraisal. You're going to need access to the public records in the MLS. You want to look at your work file, have that handy. And you know, last one may not seem very important, but strong writing skills. And that's critical because in order for you to put together a professional response, there's a few things you have to do. One, eliminate the negative tone. Two, get rid of the defensive posture on your response. Three, fight with facts. You heard the judge up here earlier. I need facts. 4, try to discredit the review who's coming after you with facts, and you can't do that unless you have facts. And you'll see the 2 examples that we provide at the end here, totally 2 different approaches, both very successful.
Yep. Okay, common errors that are made by reviewers. The first thing is they really don't understand Standard 3. And you better make sure that you do before you respond to their review. And it's not just Standard 3, there's other assistance you can get through USPAP. Advisory Opinion 20, which replaced, I think, 13, but it was, or 7, but now 20 is the one for any appraisal review that includes the reviewer's own opinion of value. That's the one that's going to be used most often by the GSEs when you have to buy back a loan for your client. There's also several FAQs on the topics. We're going to cover those later. There's pages and pages of FAQs on review, but only a few that kind of deal with what you can and can't do when you're trying to fire back. Standard 3 states that a review appraiser must. They must not render an appraisal review service in a careless or negligent manner, such as making a series of errors that individually might not significantly affect the results of the appraisal review, but as an aggregate, it affects the credibility of these results.
So pretty much the same thing when you're doing an actual appraisal. You know, don't make that many mistakes, otherwise in aggregate you have a misleading report. But this is really critical here because how about it? You know, years ago you get a review and the first thing you want to do is, and it might have been your competition, and the first thing you're out there, you're saying, oh, they shouldn't have done this, the adjustment should have been this, but you didn't provide any support on why they're wrong and you're right. So by doing that, anytime you do a review and you're just winging it and you're not doing full development and you're not redeveloping the value, this is what you're doing. You're creating a review in a negligent manner.
But it also gives you another out too as the original appraiser to say that sloppy and accurately just doesn't play. You know, you may say, maybe I am wrong on the value conclusion, and maybe you've given some better sales data, and I don't know how I missed that. But if the overall review is sloppy, that points right back to the reviewer as this, he may have a couple of good points, but for the most part, the report doesn't stand very well on its own.
And easily to defend against.
Easily. So whenever possible, don't be afraid to quote actual language out of USPAP. That makes you look very smart to the reader. They're thinking, nope, I'm dealing with a guy that really understands USPAP. Maybe he's an instructor. So, appraisal reviews and USPAP.
So did the reviewer identify the client and other intended users, the intended use, the purpose? Did it have a development of for an opinion of value? And what about the scope of work? How about it? Scope of work right now, one of the most challenging things that's out there, whether you're developing appraisals or you're reviewing appraisals. How many of you have completed or currently complete those Fannie Mae retrospective forensic reviews? All right, you submit one, and then all of a sudden, 2 weeks later, they come back, and now they want more information, and that information wasn't originally part of the original scope of work. So same thing applies when you're doing the reviews. You have to make sure you know what the scope of work is.
Yep. So consistent with the reviewer's scope of work, the reviewer is required to develop an opinion as to the completeness, accuracy, adequacy, relevance, and reasonableness of the analysis and the work under review. You have to take into consideration laws, regulations, the intended use requirements, anything that's applicable to the work under review. Okay? It's here that most reviewers, or inexperienced reviewers, are going to make errors because they just don't have the knowledge base that many of us do in this room here, and that means they don't understand all the industry guidelines. They don't understand what the difference is sometimes between a guideline and a requirement. They certainly are having a hard time understanding assignment conditions. With the influx of AMCs into the industry, we call it scope creep, they call it assignment conditions. There's 10 pages of this stuff now. So you have to familiarize yourself with it, and as more AMCs get licensed in states, they're going to have a big problem because, I don't know if you found it, we certainly have, there's a lot of times with inexperienced AMCs that don't have strong appraisers working for them, they don't understand when they're pushing into development and reporting issues and going a little bit too far into the process beyond really what they're being hired to do in terms of overall quality control, which is more administrative in nature.
Yeah, and a lot of them, you know, they may not have a licensed appraiser or certified appraiser reviewing. They may have underwriters, or they may have auditors in there, or non-appraiser related personnel working off of checklists. So they have to be very, very careful as far as how they word it. So if you're on the receiving end of this, that's why it's important, as we said earlier, find out, are you an appraiser who's asking for this? And did they phrase it correctly? If they phrased it incorrectly here, you have room to come back and ask to speak to their supervisor, you know, before you jump through the wagon for them.
Before we jump into the FAQs, I'm just going to touch on a few more things that I find quite often that people do in reviews where they get themselves in trouble. Has the reviewer made any statement that clearly is outside of their level of expertise? Are they holding themselves out to act like an attorney or a home inspector or an environmental expert, which is above and beyond anything that we've ever been trained for? Is the reviewer nailing your report for non-compliance with USPAP issues that weren't in effect when you did the appraisal 4 years ago? Are they saying stuff like there's no exposure time statement in here? They haven't determined whether or not they haven't stated in their certification that they've done a prior service or an appraisal on the property in the past 3 years. This stuff wasn't around 4 years ago when you did that report. You catch them on these little tiny, trip problems, and you'll be able to build a strong case. On the 2000 field review reports, these are designed to be done by one appraiser and one appraiser only. It even says in the certification that no one provided any significant assistance. So if he starts putting extra information in there that I had a trainee in the office assist me, or if a trainee signs the report, and there really technically isn't a certification spot on those 2000 forms for a supervisor, and you see them attaching like an extra certification page saying they're the supervisor, they don't understand they didn't read the scope that's written right into the report itself. So trainees can't complete the 2000 field reports. And for people who do more commercial work, is your report being reviewed by somebody who has a license category that's below where it should be to be reviewing your report? So in other words, it's a cert res looking at a strip mall that was done by a cert gen without a cosigner who's a cert gen. In almost every state, that's going to be against your licensing law.